Elon Musk, the guy who fell out of the dickhead tree and hit every branch on the way down and gargled the biggest nuts along the way. He's the richest man in the world, ironically having never created a single thing of his own on his own other than a video game when he was 12. He bought his way into car manufacturing, he paid a bundle accidentally to control our social media interactions, and he bought an American president. Even though he may be out of politics now, but that doesn't even matter if he's fully out or not for real because he has all of our data. We've been progressively getting insight into his character for several years now, and it's made a lot of people buy these bumper stickers for their Teslas that say, "I bought this before Elon went crazy." But it would be more accurate to say that they bought it before they noticed Elon was crazy, because the truth is he's always been like this. And you don't have to take my word for it. I'm about to show you the evidence. More and more people are simply noticing the kind of person he is, and that's in large part related to the fact that he just can't help but insert himself into just about everything. For example, the first time I had any real insight into Elon was during the Thai cave rescue operation. I was assigned to write an article specifically about Elon's involvement and break down his erratic and antisocial behavior during the whole thing. If you're unfamiliar, in 2018, 12 kids on a soccer team got trapped in a cave in northern Thailand. Divers had to genuinely risk their lives in a complicated underwater cave diving operation to get them out. And in fact, one volunteer diver did end up dead while attempting to reach the trapped kids. And Elon just swooped right in there with his wild, unrealistic nonsense solutions while this serious rescue mission was going on. One thing he wanted to do was build some kind of aquatic autonomous robot thing to get the kids out, and he just railed on anyone who told him factually why that wasn't going to work, including that the thing itself wouldn't physically fit inside the cave. That's when he famously called one of the divers a, quote, pedo guy, referring to the fact that he was a British dude living in Thailand, and Elon just couldn't imagine anyone outside of Thailand being there for anything except creepy underage brothels, apparently. And that's still on his mind today, I guess, because it's one of the accusations he's throwing at Trump during their big national breakup. Elon tweeted recently that Trump is in the Epstein files, which is why the files aren't being released. Pretty much everybody at this point knows that Elon Musk is a big rusty nutsack, but not everyone knows why. Because he really was always like this. We just didn't know. He's not the one who changed. It was our knowledge of him that changed. So how did he get like this? Who hurt you, Elon? Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from, cotton-eyed apartheid Joe? How is it that the richest man in the world got so totally broken? In order to find out, we have to dive into the life, career, and ideology of Space Karen. Let's point out on the doll where the big mean world touched him. The thing to know about Elon is that if he were a regular person and not the most powerful man on the planet, you would probably feel sorry for him. He grew up in South Africa to an abusive father. Reports that I've seen suggest it's possible that Elon's dad, Errol, may have had some undiagnosed mental health challenges and that he operated under a, quote, Jekyll and Hyde nature. Biographer Walter Isaacson wrote that, quote, one minute he would be friendly, the next he could launch into an hour or more of unrelenting abuse. He would end every tirade by telling Elon how pathetic he was. Elon has tearfully described these moments as mental torture. Elon's mother, May, has also accused Errol of physical abuse, which led to their divorce in 1979. Errol has called those accusations rubbish. Elon's family is, in a word, problematic. Elon's grandfather was the head of a fascist political movement in Canada in the 1930s. And things might start to make a little more sense to you when you know things like this, especially when we get to the substance of the movement that his grandfather ran, which was encouraging government power to be turned over to elite technocrats. The apple doesn't fall so far from the dickhead tree after all. The guy decided that he liked apartheid South Africa instead, so that's where he went. Elon Musk has this to say about his time growing up there. It was a good time because we had no crime. There were no problems. Maybe not for you, my friend. And then Errol hooked up with his stepdaughter and they had a kid together in 2017, which is super ridiculously gross all around. We're just trying to paint a picture here of the things that Elon had to grow up with, and the picture feels a lot like one of those William Blake paintings of the Book of Revelation. Both Elon and his brother Kimball didn't speak to their dad for several years after the stepdaughter thing, which I feel like is pretty reasonable, actually. And yes, Elon's brother is Detective John Kimball, so he knows who's his daddy and what does he do. There are some musings out there that Elon may have had PTSD from some of his childhood experiences and trauma. A lot of people mistakenly believe that PTSD is something that only happens to combat veterans, but any big traumatic event or experience can cause lingering mental health effects. Like, experiencing cancer and cancer treatment when you're 25. And while I've never been officially diagnosed with PTSD from that hellish experience, that's the kind of thing that might do it. And Elon's parents apparently sent him to some dystopian survival camp for kids when he was little. And while he was there, he got beat up repeatedly and had to fight for food for some reason. Isaacson wrote that that was some kind of Lord of the Flies type scenario. And so if none of that happens to be an exaggeration, that's an experience that could embed a lot of trauma all on its own. He was also viciously bullied in high school, and once he got the crap kicked out of him so hard that he ended up in the hospital, which is another really traumatic experience. And those events could potentially do it. And researchers also say that prolonged childhood trauma, like suffering abusive parents and bullying, is less likely to provide that single event or catalyst that creates post-traumatic stress. But there's sort of an unofficial diagnosis called CPTSD, or complex PTSD, that some believe can spring up from this exact environment. Other clinicians argue that CPTSD is just a manifestation of other personality disorders like borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. It's known that BPD, for instance, can absolutely come out of this prolonged period of childhood abuse. And listen, we're not diagnosing Elon with anything here because I don't have the qualifications to do so, and he hasn't been thoroughly examined by a clinician. We're simply taking a look at the possibilities based on the available evidence and expertise and connecting some logical dots as best we can. Unfortunately, Elon is the most richest meme lord around, so we can't just stop here, because I'd love for this conversation to end with some empathy for his lonely and painful childhood that brought him so much trauma and agony. But because he is so powerful, we have to talk about how all of his personal issues affect the rest of us. The Atlantic has called Musk, quote, a new kind of bullshitter, a bullionaire, an unusual purveyor of infantile jackassery, whose unfathomable wealth makes it possible and even likely that he'll carry out even the most ridiculous plans. And I, for one, think that's an incredibly accurate summary. Case in point, this thing. Which is, as far as we know, one of just 2 things he's ever designed himself. And this one was really built by other people with actual industry knowledge and specialization who had to suffer through his whims, and it still keeps catching on fire and falling apart in various ways that led to multiple recalls. This is a theme throughout his career. Insider reports suggest that people around him do their best to entertain him when he barges in. They distract him so he can't really work on anything meaningful because he'll screw it up. They can't wait for him to leave, and then they just completely disregard everything he said. And the other thing Elon made was a video game when he was 12 years old. Literally, the only thing we know for sure that Elon created himself was a bare-bones ripoff of Space Invaders as a child. So we know that at one point he had the coding skills comparable to pretty much anyone who's ever messed around in Khan Academy. Some people still probably believe he made his money by inventing electric cars at Tesla because he marketed himself pretty well as a kind of real-life Tony Stark early on. But 2 other men founded that company. Elon was an early investor, and eventually he put up enough of his money to force the other guys out. That's it. That's his Tesla story. So where did he get all of that money in the first place? Now that's a subject of intense debate online. Lots of Elon fanboys want to push the narrative that he's somehow self-made, but that's just not anywhere near the truth. The truth is that he grew up wealthy. His parents were rich. Mae Musk wrote in her book, because of course she has one, that when she divorced Errol in '79, he owned 2 homes, a yacht, a plane, 5 luxury cars, and a truck. In 1986, Errol sold the plane for 80,000 pounds and he put that money into an emerald mine. The emerald mine is for some reason a giant point of contention with the whole story of Elon Musk, but it's very real no matter what anybody says. I guess it messes with the narrative somehow, but Elon is said to have actually walked the streets of New York City with literal emeralds just sticking out of his pockets. His father himself has said that, quote, "We were very wealthy. We had so much money at times, we couldn't even close our safe." He went on to say that closing the safe was a 2-person job, so one member of the family had to keep the money from falling out while somebody else had to carefully close the door. And then, he said, there'd still be all these notes sticking out and we sort of pull them out and put them in our pockets. And when Errol got a hold of the mine, he referred to it as an under-the-table operation. He said out loud in an interview for some reason that, quote, if you registered it, you would wind up with nothing because the blacks would take everything from you. By the way, do you know who's not a big stupid racist? Me. So do me a favor and like this video and subscribe to the channel if you like what I'm doing here. I'm trying to build a community of like-minded people who aren't assholes and who want to improve things around them as best as we can, and I'd really appreciate the help. Elon's family is gross. They're also rich. Elon grew up in a super wealthy white neighborhood in Pretoria, South Africa. He was afforded opportunity and advancement that other people simply do not have access to. He attended ritzy private schools where other celebrities went to. He had an education and access that brought him sliding into home plate by the time he was born. The first and probably only money he ever made on his own was from the sale of that video game for $500. Elon and Kimball made a company together called Zip2 after their dad gave them £28,000 to start it. They later sold that company in 1999 to Compaq for $300 million. Zip2 was just the Yellow Pages digitized, and it made money by convincing companies to pay for a spot inside of it. I've seen reports that Elon personally pocketed somewhere around $22 million from the deal, and he denies left and right that their dad ever gave them any money for it, but that information is in a 2015 biography of Elon. Then he took the money from Zip2 to start X.com in 1999. And this should tell you just how long he's been obsessed with this incredibly weird X thing. From putting it in his rocket company, SpaceX, to turning Twitter into X, to naming his kids iterations of X. It's deeply weird, and he's always wanted to force it to be a thing. And we know it's weird because as soon as outsiders get involved, like when X.com merged with Peter Thiel's Confinity, everyone there was like, no dog, X is a dumb name. We're calling this PayPal. And yeah, I feel like not a lot of people know that Elon had anything to do with PayPal, but he was there when the thing was made, and part of it was something that he tried to create himself that nobody else liked. No one liked it or him so much that they forced him out as CEO in 2000 and replaced him with Peter Thiel, which is yikes. And there's a long history of this, of kicking him out of things because he sucks. But then somehow or other, Musk also weasels out a way to claw some measure of success out of the fact that everyone on Earth hates him. In that case, he happened to be the largest shareholder of PayPal. And so when eBay bought it in 2002, it said that he personally came away with somewhere between $165 and $180 million. This is another trend with Elon. He just owns stock that appreciates or pays out over time. That's kind of it. He owns companies, and anytime he actually tries to manage those companies, they lose value. But he's probably hedged either way because he's shorting stock, so he's making money anyway. He went on to actually create a company in 2002, which was SpaceX, and then buy another one in 2003, which was Tesla, the company that made him famous, even though two other men actually started that one. But at this point, Elon was overextended and in trouble. His brother, Detective John Kimball, said that Elon was, quote, in debt and more than broke. But then, big shocker, like 99.9% of billionaires everywhere who are sticklers for pretending they're self-made geniuses, Musk was bailed out by the government and his companies were saved with public taxpayer money. In the late 2000s, after the space shuttle program was sunsetting, NASA was forced to hitchhike to space on the ancient Russian Soyuz rockets launched from the remote, desolate landscape of the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. It was then that NASA handed a $396 million contract to SpaceX for unmanned resupply missions to the International Space Station. After that point, multiple contracts followed, including one to replace Soyuz as the ferry system to the ISS starting in 2020. And in 2021, SpaceX received a $3 billion contract to take humans to the moon. But because he's not really a businessman or like an engineer or programmer or anything other than a professional troll, really, he's had a lot of regulatory issues and legal woes throughout his working life. Like when Tesla went public in 2010, which, it was the first car company to do so since 1956, and that's impressive, and they raised $226 million in the IPO. But then in 2018, Elon made a dumb threat about taking the company private again. He tweeted out that he'd secured funding to do just that, and share prices would start at $420. And this landed him in hot water with the SEC for securities fraud, because he was attempting to manipulate buyer perception about stock prices. The whole thing ultimately forced him into a settlement with the SEC for $20 million, and he was also forced to resign as chairman of Tesla for 3 years. And then in 2021, Musk was sued again by a Tesla investor for his repeated erratic and unlawful tweets about the company and its value, which lawyers argued constituted making false statements about the finances to the public. This is also when he changed his official company title from CEO to Techno King, seemingly in response to the idea that people could keep holding him accountable for things, and he didn't like that and wanted to pretend he could just do whatever he wanted instead. So he's a guy who needs to try to make himself feel better by giving himself stupid edgelord nicknames. I think the very best way to explain Elon Musk is that he's simply a 12-year-old boy inside. He's a weird, lonely guy who felt deeply hurt and alone throughout his life, didn't experience love or a support system to allow him to grow and mature, and he does really stupid and cringy things that children would think are cool, like naming his cars for an acronym that spells out the word sexy. You probably didn't ever think about that, and I didn't know about it for a long time either, but Tesla car models as they were released are models S, 3, X, and Y. Then there's that 2018 tweet about taking Tesla private with a share price of $420, $420 being drug parlance for smoking weed. Then there's the time he sold an actual flamethrower to fund his failed Boring Company because of a line from the movie Spaceballs where they talk about selling merchandise, quote, such as lunchboxes and flamethrowers. It's worth noting that Musk created the entire Boring Company seemingly because he was mad one day that he had to sit in traffic. He tweeted that he was just going to bore a tunnel through the earth, and then he literally turned that into securing real and lucrative contracts with multiple cities in exchange for creating these tunnels, which he never did. Another Great Atlantic quote that sums up this dynamic reads as follows. Elon Musk says or does absurd and even stupid things, but then those absurd and stupid things end up paying off. Scott Galloway, a professor at the New York University Stern School of Business, had this to say to the Washington Post about Musk. Is it the errant missives of an eccentric billionaire, or is it dangerous? And the answer is yes, and that it is. And now Elon may or may not be making up with Trump. He just apologized for some of the things he tweeted about, like Trump being in the Epstein files, though I think we already knew he was in there. What Elon represents, and also in a way, to a lesser extent, his ex with benefits, Donald Trump, all this cultural and economic and now political dependence on these rich garbage patch people who don't care about anyone or anything beyond what they can do for themselves, and their pathological clawing for power and attention. This is the thing that's going to absolutely end us if we allow it. Right now, we are. We're allowing giant, mentally crippled man babies to run our society when they should probably all be in inpatient psych care until they can develop the emotional maturity of normal human beings and learn how to function in society. These are the people that in the past we would have just left them beside the saber-toothed tiger den and told them we'd be right back. Yeah, we're just playing a fun game and you're definitely the main character. Just hang out here. We have to put the fun surprise together for you. Oh, don't worry about that growling. It's just Bobby's iPhone, just playing some sick nature beats. And I haven't even mentioned anything about the guy's blatant drug use yet. A new report from the Times claims that he's been abusing ketamine, which we all knew, but also lots of other things too. And he carries around a pill case with at least 20 pills in it everywhere he goes. He's outright told people that he's taking so much ketamine it's affecting his bladder. So he's peeing himself and seeing things on magic mushrooms and frying his brain with Adderall, I guess. And you have to go to work tomorrow and pee in a cup, and there better not be any THC in there or you're fired. Unfortunately, modern society has no accountability features for someone with more money than God. We just for some reason stop punishing people beyond a certain net worth. It's a very disturbing feature, and I wish we could do something about that because I'm convinced that in the future, we're going to stop walking on eggshells around these people and find out they have some intense pathologies happening in their disjointed brain parts. And we're going to stop letting them run things. But right now, we're letting them off on every single thing they do. Illegal, unethical, and just plain bizarre. And we're entertaining their whims, like the one Elon has about populating the world with as many of his test tube babies as he possibly can. This desire to fill the world with his spawn would be super revolting if it weren't for the fact that the ones that are old enough to think for themselves seem to hate the shit out of him. It would be very funny to me if he accidentally built an army of anti-Elons instead of whatever weird eugenics experiment he's trying to run on the rest of us. And I promise I'll never run experiments on you, so please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's work together to make sure we get people into government who deserve it, people who believe it's a public service and who treat it that way. People who really care about making the world a better place and who won't stick around until they're on their deathbeds to hoard as much wealth and power as they can. Let's do some f***ing good about wealth and power in America. And let's do some f***ing good about Elon Musk. The next time you see him, give him a hug. He's a sad, lonely kid inside. If we get him to therapy and show him we genuinely care, then maybe he won't want to destroy the planet and run away to Mars anymore. But then again, maybe we should just let him leave on one of his exploding rockets. I'll see you in the next one.